Let me tell you a story. What's so you asking that? Before we get into tonight's story, I wanted to take the time to let you, the listener, know that the main character in this story deals with suicidal ideations. If you need help, if you feel hopeless, if you feel that you can't go on, please go get help. There are always people that will listen to you and can help. There is always a number to call that someone is available 24/7. That number is 1-800-273-8255. You don't have to do this alone. Reach out. But please, remember the most important thing. You matter. You matter. My whole life, I've been disconnected from all that happens around me. From my perspective, it's as if reality and I are on separate layers. I feel as though I am dreaming, even when awake. As if I'm simply observing existence rather than experiencing it. I wander through life with no real motive, emotion, or concern. Relating to others is almost completely impossible. However, due to this, I became quite the expert at creating a personality that will best suit my surroundings. I am held in high regard by most people I meet, however, am easily forgotten. I convinced myself that this life is a dream, and when I die, I will awake in the next, or in the real world at least. I'm not afraid of death. I never have been. I explained my numbness to my mother many years ago. To my surprise, she said that she had always felt the same way. She was the only one I ever exposed my true thoughts to. When my father came home one day to find her hanging in their bedroom, he always blamed me, saying I put all the darkness in her head, to which I simply nodded at the time. We didn't speak after her death, but I knew he always resented me. I received a call a few weeks ago from the hospital informing me that my father had finally passed away. He had been in the hospital for months following a car accident. He had driven off the road and into a tree. He was drunk as expected. On impact, he flew out of the windscreen and onto the hood of his car, damaging his neck. He was found hours after the incident and had been in a coma since. I never visited him in the hospital. I didn't think he'd care about a visit, and I didn't care to check on him either. I went to the funeral as to not upset the extended family. I tried to cry in order to put on a show of sympathy, but simply couldn't. If I'm being blunt, everyone's lives just seem so irrelevant. I am dreaming, and this is my dream. The others who occupy it are just as fake as the world around me, so the death of another just doesn't mean much to me. Not too long after the funeral is when it all started. I came home one day after playing the clown at the office. The rain poured down heavily as I pulled into the car park outside my building. I took the lift up to my flat on the 14th floor. I distinctly remember hearing the rain relentlessly coming down, even from inside the building. After finding my door, I entered my flat and allowed the door to slam behind me, consuming me in darkness. That's when it hit me, the unmistakable scent of whiskey. I froze for a moment and kept my eyes fixed down the hall, listening for any sign of an intruder. My security system flashed with a red glow, temporarily lighting up the hallway. I was met with the faint silhouette of a man. He was hard to make out. I could only see him for a second, but someone was in my home. With each red flash, I tried to take in more detail. The man seemed to be hunched over, his neck tilted to the right. The silhouette was blurry, as if out of focus. I continued staring at him. The hall would flash red and then be plunged back into darkness. With each flash, he seemed to be inching closer. I reached for the light switch. I flipped the lights on, and as expected, nothing but an empty hallway leading to my living room. The smell dissipated after a few hours, but something new happened to me that night. I felt something. I could feel a weight in my stomach, a fear perhaps. It was an entirely new feeling. Feeling anything at all was new to me, and I struggled to know how to conduct myself, even alone in my flat. That night, I went to bed with the door open as I usually do. The hallway is partially visible from my bed. The faint red flash rhythmically continued. When I awoke, I again smelled whiskey. Daylight illuminated the flat. I hesitantly looked around my doorway of the bedroom and out in the hallway. The man wasn't there. I convinced myself that the silhouette must have been a product of my lack of sleep, or at least that was the best rationalization I could come up with at the time. The smell, I thought, must have been a new neighbor, an alcoholic, just like my father. At the office, I struggled to continue my usual comedic outburst. Putting on a fake personality became harder and harder. People began to notice that I was quiet, blunt. Luckily, they assumed it was to do with the death of my father. They never realized that they were seeing the real me. I soon decided to stop going to work, using my father's death as a reason to get time off. I needed time to reestablish my composure, rid myself of the building anxiety. I had spent a week or so at home, mindlessly going about various different activities, reading, cooking, occasionally watching something on television. Just when I felt I had come to terms with the strange moment of fear I experienced, I saw him again. It was late in the night, maybe 3 a.m. I often struggled to sleep without medication. I turned off the television, which yet again plunged the flat into darkness, and made my way down the hallway to my bedroom. After reaching my bedroom, I remember faintly hearing someone start to breathe. The breathing sounded strained, painful. The sound was coming from behind me. I hesitantly turned, and there he was, looming just outside the doorway. The stench of whiskey was almost overwhelming. The red flash gave me a glimpse of his awful silhouette every few seconds. His crooked neck and bloodshot eyes will forever be burned into my memory. I stared at him as he mumbled incoherently. I felt a guilt rising within me, a sadness, a deep hatred all building up. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it. I pressed my forehead against the door and caught my breath. After a few moments, I took a step back and listened for him. The flat was terribly quiet. I kept my eyes on the door handle. After a minute or so, the door handle suddenly shook violently. He was trying to get in. The fear building inside me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. When he finally stopped trying the door, I listened as he spoke. He told me how much he hated me for what I did to Mother. His voice was hoarse, deep. It sent chills down my spine, filled me with an anxiety that has refused to leave me to this day. My father hated me. I awoke on the floor the next morning. The morning sun penetrated the flat. A noose hung above my bed, and the stench of whiskey remained. I forced myself to my feet and stood before the door. The door to my bedroom was open. I hesitantly peered around the door, terrified of the thought of my father being in the hallway. I found the hall to be empty. I headed to the bathroom and turned on the tap to splash my face with cold water. When I turned the tap on, water didn't disperse. Instead, whiskey poured out. I watched as the brown, awful-smelling liquid drained. I looked in the mirror and saw my father standing behind me. His face was distorted with a wicked smile, as if he was happy to see my torment. I turned to see no one stood behind me. I dared not look back into the mirror. I left the bathroom and went straight back into my bedroom, closing and locking the door behind me. I fell to my knees and wept. I must have passed out as I awoke to find myself yet again on the floor of the bedroom. I couldn't tell how much time had passed. The flat was in complete darkness. No light came through the windows, nor did the security system flash. I pulled my phone out of my pocket to use the torch. The torch illuminated my bedroom. I shone it towards the hallway to find my bedroom door wide open. The light from my phone didn't allow me to see into the darkness of the hallway. My fight or flight instinct kicked in. I couldn't stay any longer than I had to. I was terrified. I ran out of my bedroom and to the front door. I didn't look around me, but I knew he was there. I kept trying the door, but it wouldn't open. I could hear my father's breathing headwind me, his heavy footsteps inching ever closer. I twisted and pulled the door handle with all my strength. Tears began streaming down my face. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. My legs gave out as I fell to my knees. I didn't know what I could do. Paralyzed with fear, I held my eyes closed as hard as I could, pressed my head against the door and waited. As soon as I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, I began to realize how ridiculous this whole experience was. None of this is real. Why should I feel guilty for my actions, for my words? I turned to face my father. He looked down at me with a somber expression. He helped me to my feet and led me to my bedroom. I stepped up onto the bed and placed the noose around my neck. My father stood at the foot of the bed and maintained eye contact with me. I was ready to wake up. I walked off the end of my bed, and as I did, my father's expression changed. He began to smile, not in a warm, welcoming way, but in a way that showed his true resentment towards me. He was happy. The pain was excruciating. It felt as if my lungs were on fire. I struggled to wriggle free from the noose. As my strength began to fade, I had awful thoughts. What if I was wrong? What if this world is real? What if I was a bad man, a terrible son to a mother who struggled with depression? Maybe this is what I deserve. In death, I will find out what is real. At the very least, I will be at rest. As my vision began to darken, the last thing I remember was my father taking a step towards me. I awoke on the floor. The morning sun filled the room. The flat smelled musty, as it did before my father's visits. My father was nowhere to be found. Everything seemed back to normal. The noose, however, remained above my bed. I haven't decided whether I'm going to leave this world yet. I'm writing this as a sort of confession. I walk with the guilt of who I am, the guilt of being the way I was born. I have begun to isolate myself as to not hurt anyone else. I don't have the strength to mask who I am with the fake personalities I used to. I'm going to make a decision today to either discover what it means to live as a human or to find out if any of this is real. I still see my father at times, in the mirror in my bathroom or in the reflection of the glass in a shop window. He stands behind me. His face always has the same blank expression, his neck tilted to the right. He no longer scares me. He is a constant reminder of who I am. A reminder of the man I don't want to be.